Welcome back. We're continuing our focus, looking ahead of the forthcoming governorship elections across the country. The state assemblies will also be, elections in those areas will also happen. Well, Dr. Austin Tam-George, also former lecturer, University of Cape Town, South Africa, also here with us today. Well, speaking about us developing this democratic temper, because we've seen the president, we've seen the president-elect, both of them are speaking, they're saying the right things about leadership, what they need to do, how they need to go about it. But we can't say the same thing for their followers and what's going on in other parties. So it means that the job of the people, Nigerians, who should be able to elect freely whoever they want at any point in time, anywhere, is not over.
No, it's not. It's not. And that is why, I keep repeating the point that the people must vote according to the issues. And the issues have nothing to do with ethnicity. The issues have nothing, in fact, to do with the parties. Because if you ask me, looking from outside in, I don't see any fundamental difference between the APC and the PDP, for instance. I mean, a lot of the members... Even
though they always argue, that's no, you can't say a difference.
A lot of the people, a lot of a large chunk, those who call themselves chieftains of the APC, were until just over a year ago, chieftains of the PDP as well. So I am not, and you don't see any sense of ideological distinction, if there is ideology at all, between the PDP and the APC. So what should matter, in my opinion, is not so much the parties, the ethnicities, and even the individuals involved, but whether the issues that materially affect your life is addressed by any particular government in power. And I've just mentioned these issues, to repeat. Do you have water to drink? Drinkable water. Do you have it? If you don't have it, it's inexcusable to allow such a government to continue. Do you have proper education? Do you have structures of accountability? You mentioned in your introduction about state assemblies. Are they passing laws? You can't hold a National Assembly responsible for legislative duties that ought to be, acted out at the state levels. Are they passing laws that directly resonate with the needs of the people? If they don't, then we have a problem, and the people ought to make sure that they tackle these issues and have their say during state elections.
The question will be, are these issues sinking in? I mean, this talk of let's vote issues, because it would seem that Nigerian politicians know where base sentiments lie, and they know how to exploit these sentiments to the fullest. It was same when elections are near. If you look at the map of Nigeria and even voting across the states over this last election, it would seem that we went down that route more than ever. Some people would tell you that it's only in certain states that maybe people consider the issues at all.
Yes, I agree, but we can't be hostages to cynicism. We can't say, well, since the people are not properly informed, since the people are not properly educated on these issues, therefore we should throw our hands in the air in despair. In fact, that is what you're doing here in channels, raising the issues, putting the focus on these issues, and inviting experts to comment on them, to invite attention to these issues. I agree that politicians will want to exploit some of the primordial sentiments you talked about. You can't expect politicians typically to hold themselves to account.
They want to explore. They have already explored it.
Yes, you see, if we look at in the short term, it is of benefit to them. But you see, in the final analysis, though, every person loses if we forgo the issues and rather focus attention on all of these primordial issues. Because if you vote someone who is who worships the same God, is in the same, squats in the same mosque with you, or worships in the same church with you, once those people get to Abuja, once those people get into power, they don't think about you. They always think about themselves, and the issues will continue to go out of focus. Another very important point, Markwe, is that it is self-interest for the politicians to make the people remain ignorant. Because the more ignorant you are, the more you hold the devil or other forces responsible for your condition. In fact, wealth and poverty are material conditions created by social policies, and the prevailing social policy we have in Nigeria is corruption and unaccountability. And so there's a direct correlation between the material conditions of millions of Nigerians and the kind of corrupt practices we have in our governance structures. So there's no mysticism about this, but I understand your point. Politicians will typically, mystify governance. They will tell you it's not easy to do. They will tell you it's not our responsibility to do. They will tell you we will do it by the grace of God. But God is not an important component in administration. These are human systems. These are systems that can only be perfected or ruined.
But again,
by humans.
You would agree with those who also argue that the center, because I'm trying to look at it on both sides,
yes.
that the center is truly important in this whole equation.
Yes.
I recall once how Lagos had its fund withheld, and they say if it wasn't the ingenuity of the state at that point in time, given that we had some hardworking personnel in the state, people who were ready to see that it doesn't fail, Lagos would have been a failed state. And you try to also to marry that with what has come out of the governor of Osun State. Recall he also said that, look, I'm owing this money because of what has gone wrong at the center, to the extent that we now have positive funds coming in for us to drive this process. So if we look at that and look at the revenue that the state will finally hand out to states, and we'll look at states that are not as vibrant as Lagos to kick off by themselves, how do we explain to those people in such states and in such situation that the center doesn't matter what happens?
Now, if the administration in Osun State says that they can't pay salaries because commodity prices are collapsing and they are getting less and less allocation from the center, that is a scandalous excuse. In Japan, they don't have the natural resources we have. They have, in fact, only earthquakes and typhoons. And yet they have the fourth largest economy on earth. So if you have a state and you can't tap into the creative genius of your own people and you're waiting for the national government to give you allocation, it is an open admission of failure. And the people must be enlightened to hold such an irresponsible administration to account. This has nothing to do with the federal government. Don't forget that those who are waiting for the federal government to give them allocations, ask them how much do their states in fact contribute to the national distributable pool. Let me give you an instance. In the federation account, 74% of the federation account comes from resources from just the 6 local states in the Niger Delta, 20% from the whole of the Southwest, 8% from the whole of the Southeast. Not a single dime comes from the North. In fact, even in the whole of the Southwest, much of it comes from Lagos alone. And you see, these are the same people who keep agitating for state police. They are agitating for more states. They are agitating for all kinds of things. They have not tapped into the creative genius of the people in those places. There are people who are into farming. The governors don't want to encourage alternatives.
Has any state done that? Has any state tapped into the creative, should I say, talent of its people?
They haven't, and that is why we have a failed state. That is why we have a failed state. The point is that, you see, you mentioned the example of Lagos, and I agree with you absolutely. But you see, I wouldn't be comparing Lagos with Abia State. Lagos has resources that are, in fact, higher than the resources in Senegal. The budget of Lagos State is higher than the budget of Senegal. Now, the point I'm making is that we should be comparing Lagos with California. We should be comparing Lagos, not with Osun State, but with Singapore and the rest of them. Because, I mean, we need to make sure we have higher standards of expectations from those who are in governance structures. So for a governor to say, well, you know, I can't pay salaries, I can't give you water to drink, I can't fund teachers simply because allocations have dropped at the center, I think this is something that should be considered unacceptable by people across the country.